Hello, I'm very happy to chair this session. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker today, Professor Gary Campbell. Professor Gary Campbell is a professor at Michigan Tech. He's a specialist in mining and mineral economics, and with a special focus on socio-economical dimension and sociological dimensions and aspects and consequences of mining. And we all know that this kind of industry has some huge impacts on social community. So most of his latest publications talk about these consequences, but also the social acceptance of mining and the relations between mining and corporate social responsibility. He's going to deliver today a keynote speak about the relation between mining and circular economy, which is quite a surprising topic, and we especially in the last slides, to try to show that it is possible under some conditions. So, Professor Campbell, we are very happy to have you here, and the floor is now yours for this presentation. And if you keep it short enough, we'll have time for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I guess I'm the speaker for the early morning risers.
It's 8 o'clock for us, but even earlier for you.
For me, it's later. It's Thursday night for me, so we've got the same problem at opposite ends.
Yeah, thank you very much for attending this session at this difficult time for you.
Oh, no, that's fine. I understand the issues. So I would like to share my screen if I can do that.
Is it possible to help Professor Campbell to share his screen, to give him the rights to share his screen?
There you go. Can you see it?
Not yet. Give us a few minutes for the setup. Ah, yes, now we see your screen. Yeah, perfect. Okay, that's good.
Okay, so we ready to get started?
Yeah, ready.
Okay, so as pointed out, people don't typically put the idea of circular economy, a green future, sustainability with mining. And this question's been raised many times. So I'd like to address that. Now, first, when you look at market economics, we've had a tradition of looking at it as a linear process. Resource, other inputs of production, leading to producing our goods, using it, and throwing it away. The assumption of this is we've always had materials, demand can grow, and so forth. The circular economy approach says that there may be limitations, that we may not be able to continuously grow, that we may have to take into account realities that we have a finite resources, we have finite ability to grow. So they see the process more as a circular one, where we try to reuse materials, minimize the use of new materials, make what we have last longer. Another graph that comes from ecological economics shows the same thing, that we are in a system that has limited resources available to us. We have a limited environment, so we can't have this infinite growth that the traditional model allows, and we have to have a more sustainable model, circular economy being one of those. Now, some principles for this. One is, of course, we want to reduce our waste and our negative impacts and minimize those. We want to minimize the amount of materials we're using, so reuse as long as possible instead of just a throwaway culture. And also don't overstress our environment, give it time to recover. Like if the ocean is very good at absorbing CO2, carbon dioxide. However, if we hit it with too much of the gas, it's not able to do so. This has been reduced, of course, to a little phrase: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So this is where people are talking we want to go. We want to move away from the traditional model, linear, infinite growth. We have all the resources we'll ever need, to one of growth has to be more controlled. We have to have better use of the resources we have available to us. Now, how does mining come into this? Mining would seem to be a material where it doesn't fit. Many, many years ago, I was involved with a project with my state of Michigan looking at resource use and its availability as with urban growth. And at that time, this would be 20 some years ago, people in the committee that I was working with says, mining shouldn't be part of this. It's not part of a sustainable future. It's non-renewable. It destroys the environment. We want to go to renewables. We want to go to renewable energy, green technologies. That sounds very good, but there's a problem. The problem is, how do you get renewable energy and these other things? Well, they need materials. For example, with lithium-ion batteries, here's an example of some of the non-renewable minerals we need. Cobalt, which is an area that I like to research, graphite, lithium. There's a lot of talk about finding enough lithium, manganese. So for EVs, solar power, the cells, they need arsenic, gallium, germanium, indium, tellurium, selenium. Again, non-renewable minerals. Wind turbines, wind power, aluminum, rare earth elements are necessary. And this doesn't even include all the wiring and things that use copper and so forth. Copper, by the way, is by far the largest material used in renewable energy. And of course, that's a non-renewable resource. So just giving a summary here, we have a lot of minerals that we need for, in case, renewable energy, which is an important aspect of a circular economy. So now we have a problem. In order to be more sustainable, to develop renewable energy, we need to use non-renewable minerals. What can we do about that? Well, there's no way that we're at this point that we can make the use of non-renewable minerals completely sustainable, but we can do a better job of fitting into a circular economy. And I have listed here 2 approaches to use. One is we reuse the materials so we don't need as much new materials. We don't need to mine as much. Recycling of consumer products. This is the topic we'll spend most of the time with today. The other aspect is, can we do a better, more efficient job of mining? Mining companies already have some incentive to do this for making a higher profit, but they have issues that we'll look at as well. So first, I want to look at this issue of more recycling, because this would seem to be a natural thing to do, right? To be more sustainable, recycling is a natural approach. Why don't we do more of it? I pulled up here a graph from a study done for the UN. It's a little old now, it's over 10 years, but it shows the issues we run into. For example, this Latinide road. You notice it's all in red. On this graph, red is bad. That means little recycle. Blue is good. Blue means substantially more recycling, over 50%. So you notice that we don't recycle much of the rare earths. You can see in the 31 here in this area, it's red. That's used in the solar power. We do a little better job with the ion batteries, cobalt and nickel, copper. And I'm going to explain why. These results are not surprising. The economics of recycling would suggest that we would see this, but certainly we have more room for recycling. So why doesn't it occur more often? Now, when you look at the economics of recycling, we like to differentiate in the types of recycling. Some of us use the term old and new. These are not official terms. Old refers to the consumer products, recycling of those. New refers to materials that are generated in a production cycle and then are kept in the production cycle. So if you're cutting out metal shapes, the waste metal is put back into the process, and we do that. Now, historically, most recycling has been new recycling. The idea of materials being generated in production. Recycling of consumer products has been less used. So we've been trying to increase the older type. The companies already have the incentive to do the new. It has a lot of advantages. It's right there. They don't have to transport it any distance typically. It's clean. It's not contaminated. They don't have to identify. It has a lot going for them. Consumer products, they're messy. They're out in the environment. You have to gather them up. They're contaminated. You have to identify. You have to separate. So you have some additional costs there. Okay, so that's why in the past, we typically have done the new recycling with materials where that was appropriate. Those blue sections you saw fit in that category. The older materials for consumer products are less recycled. Now, what's the difference in the economics of secondary production, recycling, and production of new materials, primary production? One key aspect is the nature of the costs themselves. For recycling, they tend to be less focused on capital costs and more fixed on variable costs. Capital costs means machinery. If you look at a modern mine, they are very capital intensive, huge machines, very few people. This varies around the world, but in the United States, you go to a mine, there are very few people working. In mineral processing, you can't even find people. You find there are a few people in a control room somewhere. Now, when something breaks down, everybody goes run to it. But we use more and more machines and less people. Now, in secondary production, the trend is we need people. We need to gather the materials. We need to sort. We need to identify. Now, the economics of this can be problematic. In an industry where prices fluctuate, which is true for non-renewable resources, this will give an advantage to fixed cost industries over variable cost industries. Why is this? Because once you've paid your fixed cost, you only have to meet your variable cost. And so with low variable costs, if the price drops, you'll stay in business. If you have variable cost and the price goes down, you shut down because you control the variable cost. In this case, you lay off people, you turn off the electrical power, you go home. So the very nature of the cyclical price of minerals has made primary production more attractive than secondary production historically. Now, one thing that's happening in countries is they are moving to try to make recycling more of a fixed cost oriented industry. It was collection day today in my neighborhood. And every 2 weeks they collect recyclables as well as garbage. They pick up the garbage every week. Well, now they use one big truck. I have a big barrel I roll out, big bin, 40 some gallons, and all the recyclables are put into it. It's one stream, so I don't have to separate, unlike Europe. I just spent the spring in Europe, and we had to carefully separate everything there. Here, we just dump it all in the bin. This big truck drives up. It has an arm that reaches out, clamps the barrel, dumps the barrel, and back. And the guy never gets out of the truck. So we're using machines instead of people to do this. Then they try to use machinery to separate, as opposed to having people do it. If nothing else, people get tired. They don't start to see things. Now, another aspect, of course, is secondary is much more attractive because it uses less energy and reduces environmental cost. So if we can get around this variable fixed cost, clearly recycling is a more attractive approach. Now, what drives this cost? Why is it not attractive? One is technological limitations. When I showed that periodical chart showing recycling, I noticed that cobalt and nickel and copper had high levels of recycling. Rare earths, germanium, gallium did not. One reason for that is technological limitations. A battery, which is what we were talking about with the cobalt and nickel and lead and so forth, is a big chunk of metal just sitting there. It's pretty easy to separate that, collect that. The rare earths are often spread out very thin, so it's really hard to gather it all backed up. Example is lead. When I was younger, lead had several uses. It was used in lead batteries for cars, which it still is. It was also used as an additive in things like gasoline, fuel, and paint. Well, we don't use that anymore because of health issues, but we never recycle from the paint or the fuel because the lead would be spread out in such thinly, it just wasn't technologically feasible to do so. But the lead battery was always recycled because it was just a big chunk of lead sitting there. It was very easy to recycle. So technological aspects are one limitation. Another is the cost. We mentioned that recycling gives us an advantage in helping the environment, but the people involved in the market may not be seeing that directly. So they deal with private costs and benefits. Okay, this is what it costs for me to produce this. This is what I sell it for. This is how much I produce. The buyers say, here's what it costs to buy. I can use it. So they're looking at their private costs and making decisions accordingly. But we know that there's a cost to the environment of mining it, of throwing it away, of using it. Those costs are not directly included in the market. We call those social costs, benefits, or externalities. So what we see is that with the primary production, we have higher social cost. But if the market is not looking at social costs, it's being subsidized. And therefore, the advantage of the recycling, which reduces the social costs, is not seen and not taken apart. Here's a simple little diagram to try to show that. So a private market gives us the demand curve, the supply curve, Q1, P1. That's the market equilibrium. But it doesn't include the social costs, the externality cost of the pollution, for example. If we include that, we get this social marginal cost, our social supply curve. Now, if that was included in the market, we would now get a market solution of P2, Q2. We would use less and the market price would be higher. But we're at P1 and Q1, leading us to an inefficient market. So things are not equal. If we included all the cost in the market, there would be more of a drive for recycling. Without the social costs, the private costs, for reasons I explained earlier, has the advantage. Okay, so if we include all the costs, including the social costs, market economists believe that the market should function correctly and we would get the right result. We would get the sustainable results that we needed. However, if the market does not accurately reflect that, as shown by this picture, we're getting Q1 and P1 instead of P2 and Q2, we're going to get an inefficient market, as shown here, dead weight loss. So that means that typically the government has to step in and try to do something to correct this. Now, there's a variety of approaches, different weight here. How can we more accurately account for those social costs so we make better decisions and have a more circular economy functioning mining industry? Well, one is just people to learn about the social cost and take those into account, to voluntarily separate their recyclables and recycle and so forth. Call that education. Europe does this to a much more degree than, say, the United States does, trying to convince people that through education, this is the right thing to do. Market economists are a little leery of that. They think people respond to incentives. So 2 and 3 look at more adjusting the market. The first one is still using the market by Coase. Coase was with the University of Chicago. And so he was very much let the markets settle it. But what his argument is if we get a better established property rights, basically who owns the environment, who owns climate change and so forth, will make appropriate decisions. What he basically argued was if there was an inefficient range like this, the two sides would get together and bargain. If it was worth more to us to not damage the environment, we would give some of that benefit to the company to stop it. And we'd be more efficient. When I was young in the United States, smokers owned the air. They could smoke wherever they wanted to. Over time, society in the United States has changed, and now the non-smokers own the air, and smokers have to get their permission. Okay, so the property rights are important, but he argued that once we had the established property rights, we would be willing to eliminate inefficiencies through basically market negotiations. Now, he admitted that practically there would be problems with this, that how do you get a bunch of people to negotiate with a factory to reduce its pollution? So he freely admitted that transactional problems and other problems would create an issue. Pigol, who was another economist of the day, argued that what we should do is basically move the supply curve to the social marginal cost curve or demand to this point. And he argued you could do that through incentives or disincentives. You could increase their cost through taxes to get us to P2 and Q2, or we could use subsidies to encourage them to introduce equipment and so forth. But they would need an incentive. And by doing that, we could get it to where we'd want to be. Now, of course, this means the government has to be able to determine what P1, P2 and PQ, Q2 and P1 are. How much do we want to allow? So that requires some information we may or may not have. Regulations is the most common and most approved approach, which basically the government says, you will do this. You will use this equipment, you will recycle, and so on. An example. When I was a young man, we had aluminum cans for soft drinks and beer and so forth. People would drink it and then throw it on the ground. Now, aluminum can technologically is very simple to recycle. It's a lump of aluminum. But they weren't getting recycled. Why not? Because aluminum then, as today, was a relatively cheap material. There wasn't much aluminum in a can, so it wasn't worthwhile. A aluminum can just didn't have much value. So people just threw it away. Now, local governments got tired of seeing this on the side of the road. So they put a value on it. In the case of my state, 10 cents. And in those days, 10 cents was serious money, a tenth of a dollar. Probably the soda was like 15 cents, so it was a rather substantial. But you paid it when you bought the can. When you turned the can back in, you got the 10 cents back. The cans all disappeared from the side of the road. If people still know you're rich and you still throw it away, somebody went up and picked it up. Okay, in this case, that was a tax subsidy, right? Big wall. Now, another one they will follow was we use and we still use a fair amount of coal in power plants. And some coal has a lot of sulfur. Sulfur gets into the air from the plants. It leads to sulfur dioxide, creates acid rain. So they wanted to reduce that. So they passed a regulation. You said you had to use a piece of equipment that cleaned the gas out of your smokestack. Now, that seems fine, but there's no market tests there. What it did was everybody had to buy this, what they call a scrubber, and put it on your smokestack, and it eliminated other market options. One very viable option was low sulfur coal. Instead of buying high sulfur coal, you buy low sulfur coal. Now, this no longer made any difference because you had to buy that machinery anyway. And it happened that the high sulfur coal was closest to most of the power plants, eastern part of the United States. The low sulfur coal was in the western part of the country, far away from the power plants. So basically, it gave advantage to using the high sulfur coal, which was not the intent. I hope that was not the intent. Politics can do strange things. There were more voters in the high sulfur coal district, so maybe it was intentional, but unintended consequences when you don't use the market. Regulations have this problem. So I'm right up there. The Coles theorem, yeah, it's theoretically very nice, efficient markets, makes good decisions, but practical, it's a problem. Has high tri-action costs. Can you actually do it? The tax subsidy. It uses the market to make decisions once you create the incentives. Okay, so you can pay the tax or not pay the tax. You decide. You can put in the equipment or not put in the equipment. So that's an advantage, but you have to know what your goal is going to be. For example, with the climate change, they're coming up with these targets we want to achieve. How do we decide those targets? Are they going to work? Those are questions that aren't answered here. And then the regulations. The government steps in and says, you will do this. People like that. You're being assertive, but it does not use markets. It can lead to efficiencies, unintended consequences. Again, you have to decide, how are these things going to work? How much do we want? Okay. So one aspect of our problem is, can we encourage more efficient use of resources, use them longer and reduce the demand for primary production, making the primary production last longer, reduce the environmental damage. For example, with EVs, they're very concerned about the cobalt. One solution to that is going to be potentially deep sea mining. China, for example, is looking into that in a big way. What's the environmental cost of that? Could be very, very high. We don't really know. It'd be nice if we just didn't need as much cobalt and didn't have to go that route. Now, the other issue I was looking at is, well, what mining we do, can we do it in a more sustainable manner? Can we mine more efficiently and generate less waste? For example, in underground mining, one technique is room and pillar, where they mine and they leave pillars of the material behind. Now, of course, to the miners, the The role is, how can I remove as much of that pillar as I can without collapsing the mine on myself? So a lot of mining engineering works on that. So we could try to, how can we be more efficient in recovering the ore, generating less waste with it? Many mining and mineral processing facilities use a lot of wastewater, a lot of water. Can we recycle that wastewater? Can we use that? Because mining has two water problems. One, mines often occur where there's not much water. The main copper mining districts in Chile are in a terrible desert, no water. Mining in the United States is in the Southwest desert, so water is a problem. And of course, a lot of Americans like to live on our Southwest where it's sunny and warm all the time, and they all demand water. So water shortage is becoming a big concern there. Can we reduce? The other problem is storing the wastewater. If more water you have, the more likely you are to have dam breaks and disasters like they've had recently in Brazil and other places. So how can we use less water? Can we be more efficient in recovering values? It's been a standard process in the United States to go back to tailings. That's the waste materials from mines as technologies improve and recover more materials. When I graduated from my program at Penn State, which was in another century, some of my classmates went out west and did this as a business. They went to the old mines from the 1800s and went to their tailings and recovered gold and silver using techniques that were available in the mid 1900s, but not available in the 1800s. So they basically were mining the old waste, which means they didn't have to generate new waste. And of course, some people can now call recycling urban mining, where they try to use the similar idea to recover values that they didn't used to recover from consumer products in urban environments. So it's the same idea. Now, a growing aspect also of the concern is relationships between mines and the local communities. Increasingly around the world, mining has to come to grips with that local communities aren't always happy that they're there. Michigan Tech is in an area that was one of the primary copper mining districts of the world in the mid 1800s to the early 1900s. Now we have what we call ghost towns, abandoned facilities everywhere. Very few people living here. We're in a very, very distant rural area. Not very attractive for people. In fact, the best thing the mining district left behind was my school. They started my school to provide mining engineers for the mining industry here. They left. The school remained and grew and now is a premier engineering school, bringing lots of scholars and students here, or this area would be in fairly significant economic trouble. So local community says, okay, to be sustainable, we don't want to see environmental damage. We don't want to give up other uses of the land. We don't want to see all the economic advantage going somewhere else. So the mining companies now have to make a case to local communities in many parts of the world that there is an economic advantage to them, jobs, but mining now, the jobs tend to be limited in nature and don't last that long in many districts. Some can last. I'm just reading a book, reviewing a book about mining in Minnesota for iron ore, which they've been doing for like 140 years. But most mines don't last that long. Tax revenue, that's big in many countries. That's a big advantage. Areas that don't get a lot of tax can get a lot from the mines. Generates values for the other businesses out there. So now the mining companies have to balance the cost that the local community sees with the gains they get to show that the mining is sustainable. What does it mean for mining to be sustainable if you use it up? My school, Michigan Tech. Michigan Tech is generating value in the local community after the mining is gone. So it's very important to take the values from the mining when it's going on and retain some of that value to basically invest in the local areas in the country so that when the mining is gone, there's something else to replace it. You can call it diversification, economic diversification. It could be an education infrastructure. Norway has a huge fund that when the mining oil production is gone, they have a big fund that'll generate revenue to replace it. And I said, and this area survives because of the university that was started by mining company. So with that, I think I'll try to leave a little time for questions. It was my discussion here about how mining can be a little more sustainable than people might think. Thank you for your time, and I'll be glad to take any questions people might have.
Thank you very much, Professor Campbell, for this presentation. So we have time for questions. So we have questions both from the offline audience here in the room and from the on the chat. So don't hesitate to put your questions on the chat. For the moment, we don't have any. So do we have any questions? Yeah, we have immediately questions.
Okay, I come from Thailand. I would like to ask from an economic side. Do you think circular economy help developing countries to transition from middle to high income and reduce income income inequality? Because Thailand use BCG model. BCG model meaning is a bio, circular, and green economy to drive the Thai economy and leading to contribute income for community and transition from middle to high income.
Thank you very much.
Okay, my hearing is not as good as it once was, but I think what you're asking about is increasing the income in the country, developing country relative to the mining.
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Campbell has reformulated your question. As you heard the reformulation?
Yes, yes. Okay. Do you think this from circular economy to help developing country really? Because I think if policy support drive circular economy to successful if last from policy from government.
Yeah, mining, of course, is not a sort of activity is going to lead to development of a country typically, right? Capital comes in, money goes out. That's what happened to my area. So what's important is that raw materials value comes from their scarcity. And that scarcity value has to be captured by the country, by the community, and invested in things like education and developing income. So that, say, a country like Malaysia as well as Thailand. Malaysia and Thailand started as natural resource producers. They still do, but they were able to change that into such a way to develop more sophisticated industries, more value added. So you just can't take the money and have a good time spending it. You have to invest it in ways that you lead to development. So if you compare, they're two wealthy nations, but Norway and Great Britain did very different things with their oil money. Great Britain just paid the bills with it, where Norway invested it, and so they now have money over time to use. Now, for a developing country to become wealthier, that's an important thing to do. Is often their step into international trade and getting dollars and euros and so forth is through their resources, but they have to take the next step, use the scarcity rent develop their industries, their education, and so forth, and not depend on resources in the future. I think Southeast Asia has done a good job of that. Most African nations have done a very poor job of that, so on. So hopefully I'm getting somewhere in your question.
Thank you, Professor Campbell. We have one question on the chat.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary, for an interesting presentation. I also to develop a bit from as you mentioned that Southeast Asia is doing a better job than in African country in balancing between the benefit and the cost. You know, the benefit to the community and the cost to the community. I just wondering, yeah, from your own experience, how to, from the policy point of view as well, how to balance the negative externality and the benefit that the mining industry provide to the community. From my own my point of view, in the short run, the benefit might outweigh the potential environmental cost. But in the long run, what do you think about that? Thank you.
Well, that's in my area. We have mining, still have mining in various areas, and that's always the argument. Many people feel that the negative parts of mining outweigh the positive. The problem with that is if everybody says that, we don't get the materials we want. They don't want to give up their car. They don't want to give up their house. They don't want to give up these things, but they don't want the mining either. So we have to reach some sort of compromise here. Now, so what the mining companies are trying to do is they'll go to the community and state their case, bring the community into the discussion, try to get them to buy in. Okay, here's the issues. Here's what we're going to try to do to prevent damage to the environment. Here's what you're going to gain. When we close down, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to try to monitor it, make sure that there is no additional damage done. So they have to constantly make the case that they will minimize the damage, they'll be reliable for any damage in the future, that they're doing this with goodwill, and that the economic benefit to the community will outweigh the potential environmental damage. Now, some people just say that's not going to be the case. We don't believe you. It's not going to happen. But what we're finding is the mining company has to say, if we make a mistake, we're done. You know, nobody's going to trust us again. So it's creating a real effort by mining companies to try to do a better job, but also make their case. Now, you know, it's self-interest. It's not altruism because they want to mine in the future. Now, none of this, of course, is taking into account the global issues. We need these materials. We're creating climate change. This is all local. So something that is missing, I think, in all this is the more global aspects of the issue of mining. It's right now, it's quite local. And so it turns down, as you suggest. Can the mining company convince the local community that the damage they're going to do is less than the environmental cost? And they will point to past sites as something to compare. So the mine here where I live uses a mine a couple hundred miles away that they closed a number of years ago as an example of what's happening to show the current local community that they do a good job with protecting the environment over the long run.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we are running out of time and we need to finish this session now to move to the next one. So I see that we have questions on the chat. I'm very sorry for that. Perhaps for those who had questions, you could email your questions to Professor Campbell.
Yes.
But I would like therefore now to thank Professor Campbell for this very interesting presentation, thank the audience for the questions, and move to the next session. Thank you very much, Professor Campbell, for this presentation.
Thank you. And yes, be sure to email me.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Immediately.
Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a good
day.
Good evening and a good night.
Good night.
Yeah, good night. Good day to you.
Thank you. We have the next keynote speech. Okay.
Good morning, scholars. Thank you very much, Professor Greg Campbell, for the super exciting and trendy topic that relates so well for us today. And it's the honor to introduce our very nice keynote speakers, Professor Ivan Hock, with another exciting topic, empowering sustainable digital transformation through education. Over to you, please.
All right, very good morning. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you. But Professor Hock, there is a little bit echo. I'm not sure if the issue is here, or can you just test again? I have a little bit echo.
Hello, good morning. Is it okay now?
Yeah, I think it's okay now. And also, I would like to invite Professor Fabien to chair this keynote session, please. Thank you very much. Over to you, please, Professor Hock.
Okay, all right. Again, very good morning to everyone. It's an honor for me actually to present, to share some of the thoughts from this conference, International Conference of Business and Finance 2024. And the topic, the things that I'm going to discuss today for the next 30 minutes will be on how actually education plays a very significant role in terms of what we call what we have today, sustainable digital transformation, meaning that looking into the perspective of how education, how education bring forward of what the world going into, not just especially after the COVID, and then we talk about the sustainable development, and part of it is what we are in, which is education, and how this education system or the ecosystem actually plays a significant role. That's basically what I'm going to talk about. Right. So I start with this is a bit of the outline for today. All right. Just to give the perspective is that we we are living actually in the world, we call it the VUCA world. What is VUCA? VUCA is from the word of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. This is not new, and this has been around, the abbreviation has been around for quite a while. It's just that it seems to be more significant for the past at least a decade, when we are going through, for example, the digital transformation, and then after that the pandemic hit us, the world, and right now we are still on the verge, or we going on to the direction of what the world full of volatile, uncertain, complexity, ambiguity. So what we can do, and one of the things I want to highlight, of course, is education here, right? As I mentioned just now, we are living in the VUCA world. We no longer use a very linear solution. Means that what we do in terms of policy making, or in terms of providing a specific strategy, whether it's from the individual perspective, from the firm's perspective, from the country perspective itself, it should be from the point of view of non-linear, meaning that we have to understand the situation, we have to know what is going on, and then what kind of appropriate strategy that can be used into that particular direction. So what we can do in terms of that, because of this VUCA environment that we are living into, is that how we can enhance, how we can use what we have, for example, the digital technology, digital transformation, digitalization that the world are embarking to. It means that with volatile, the one of the solutions suggested was through visibility. Means that we have to be agile, we have to be proactive in terms of decision making. Visibility means that visible, not only visible, but then again agile in one sense. So this is for survival, of course, and related. Uncertainty is that one of the main solution is that we should not constrain ourselves. Yeah, we're living also in the world with uncertainty, and then at the same time, we are very much unconstrained with the technology that we have. With the technology that we have, we can have unlimited possibilities of technology. Of course, the technological advancement are still growing and growing, and this actually will enhance further, not just from consumer point of view, phones point of view, but also from country point of view. When they want to put into consideration what should be done in terms of putting up the appropriate policy option, right? From complexity perspective is that we are very much connected in a way, like what we have today, like what I'm doing here, despite I'm not there in Vietnam this morning, but we are connected in such a way that the technology connect us and able to share this and able to have all this knowledge and whatnot. So this make it possible because of technological advancement, of course. And the second one is that we are connected. In other words, is that we are no longer living in the world where we are in silo. Means that we're doing things alone. No countries in this world can live in silo. They should have collaboration in terms of internal, external partners, parties, and whatnot. From some ambiguity point of view, we are also what we have today is the AI. Is that the AI actually not just the fear of AI the fear of AI, or the AI actually can be used in terms of positivity to enhance, to answer that the question of ambiguity is that from that perspective, right? The same one down here will be on how view CA also from different perspective. This is one perspective. The other perspective is that we must have a vision, we must understand, we must have clarity, clear what we're going on, and agility, of course. Sorry. So part two is about I putting up the very interesting topic about the rise of the machine. I've been talking about this for quite a while. It's just that things are updated, and still until today we still talk about machine, which is AI, for example. And I quote or I put this picture because this is something happens, or this is the movie. The first Terminator was in the 80s, I think late 80s. And then throughout the years, I view this as a literature review. That's what we have today. We have robots, we have AI, we have all the technology, we have automation, machine learning, deep learning, and whatnot, which very much of what we envision, not the movies envision what we see in the future. And here we are living in that kind of world today. So the machine have rise not as a competitor to us, but as a complement, and also we work together in that particular direction. Of course, this is another good example. When I was more younger, perhaps we play this, but no longer the kids today no longer play this kind of game. This has been historical in that regards. And of course, this is another good literature review where in the movie it shows how actually the technological advancement have gone very far since the 80s and 90s, right? And again, like what we have today, this kind of webinar where we can do hybrid types of presentation was not available at least 10 years ago, or at least I would say that 5 years back. This is not a common practice to have a kind of a hybrid types of presentation, but it's possible now. Is things change for the better, not for the worse. And this connected us in such a way that we can implement a lot of suggestion strategies together in that sense, which is going to impact us, whether you are individual, whether you are belongs to a group or country by itself, right? And of course, we have moved in terms of financial technology. We have moved from what we see as the old school telephone into the machine, ATM machine, and then we have Bitcoin today. This is from the perspective of finance. But of course, I bring this attention is because this is how the revolution of information or the revolution of technological advancement have bring us of what we are today, right? This is number 2 here. And of course, as everyone knows already, we are already in this direction. We talk about IoT, we talk about Industry 4.0, how digital transformation have changed the industrialization, how it changed all the industries. And with the intensity of COVID, which is my next part of it, it have actually enhanced further of what we have. So this is no longer something new of what we have: cybersecurity, augmented reality, big data. We use that a lot today in analysis and whatnot. Autonomous have been there in terms of production side, additive manufacturing. Simulation has also been there for a while. Now we're getting much better and better. System integration, cloud computing. We no longer save. We no longer bring. I guess I still have here. Yeah. This thing perhaps can become a history. I showed you this pen drive. I mean, of course, and I still have it, but I do not use it anymore because we put a lot of our documents and whatnot inside the cloud, and we use that a lot. And so this has changed. Means that our view, our perspective should change too. In that, let me go to the next one. And as I mentioned just now, IoT, where we are today, whether you're developing countries, developed countries, whether you're in the companies and whatnot, we use this kind of technology that change. So that have changed what we have today. So what we have is Internet of Things, as everyone understand. From my perspective, Internet of Things is how machine talk to the other machine, how it's been automated, how it's been related in that sense, like how we are connected today in using application like Zoom. Here we are the machine on the other side, and my side here have been talking to each other, and we are connected in such a way using through the internet connectivity and whatnot. So this have enhanced further. This can enhance further in that sense, and we get to see more of this now and near future, of course, and pretty much very longer time in the future, right? And I want to bring this picture also is that with the technology that we have, with the scenario that we have, what actually been done? Digital transformation before the COVID, normally we are talking about this thing as part of disruption, but then I put in the word twin disruption is because not just digital transformation have been recognized as one of the disruption that happens in the world, but also COVID-19 have bring us a lot of experience, a lot of lesson from there. This is one of the example, like I always say, right? This is one of the example as the consequences, the positive consequences from COVID-19, from the pandemic, and as put up in this presentation is that the COVID-19 actually accelerate or empowering more collaboration and productivity. We do meetings, we do meet up and so on, collaboration. We can do online, we can do meeting online, and then we can go perhaps face-to-face and whatnot, right? Enhance privacy security to support remote work. That's one. Some of the organization are still practicing remote working. Is possible, and working from home is not something familiar before pandemic, but now it's quite familiar. So things have changed, policy have changed, policy options have changed, not just because of the digital transformation, but plus the pandemic. Where we are now, how we can use this as a very good platform for us to move further into the future. Of course, all these are already mentioned just now. AI-driven predictive and prescriptive analytics and digital twins, related to what I'm talking about here. We use AI a lot. We use application actually, or even before AI, all those statistical analysis that we use, involved in quantitative analysis, involve also computer generation. You estimate the simulation through whatever programs that you are using, and these have been further enhanced with the technological advancement. Right? With AI that we have today, we go further into that direction, right? Of course, with the technological with increased productivity, this will be enhanced further. Future product process will be further accelerated, right? And okay, let me go back this time. All right, okay, all right. So what we can expect from that perspective, what we can tell our future students or our current student, or what we, the universities, or perhaps especially the universities, the education side, would be able to go hand in hand with this transformation also, is that perhaps this is from IBM actually. They discussed this, they put up this some 2 years back. It says that the future of work in 2050, or perhaps it's already starting now, we are looking into this direction. We are more towards this particular direction in terms of what's the future work that can be offered, meaning that the replacement or automation, robotics is there. So it means that we do a production side, we use all the automation and whatnot. So this has been discussed, and this perhaps is what the education side will be able to take the next step, so that to produce such a graduates that will be enable it to be useful here in the working environment and whatnot. Right? Number 4 here, part 4. What's our role in education? Right? What's our role in education in terms of our education in that sense, right? This is a quote, very important quote from Nelson Mandela, that says that education is the most powerful weapon which can use to change the world. That's what I always agree. I hope everyone in education would agree that too. Despite that, we're doing very small things in terms of be a part of that system and be a part of the journey of a student. That's been a very important lesson to be talked about. So what we can do in terms of that, in terms of going hand in hand with the transformation, with the digital transformation, so that we can also further push this digital transformation into much more responsible, perhaps much more reliable and sustainable in that sense. Of course, when I talk about this, I want to always link back to SDG, and the one before that, which is MDG. The one on the left-hand side is the MDG, Millennium Development Goals, which up to 2015, and on the right-hand side is SDG, up to 2030. So we are about 5 years to go on these 17 goals that are set by the United Nations, not just by the United Nations, but then again, the country take that as part, important portion, that way they outline, or where they outline their policy, and where the universities do and whatnot. So of course, the one that very much related to us is number 4, SDG 4, quality education. But the rest of it also the same thing. We must have the kind of awareness education, not just awareness today, but go beyond awareness on how actually the role of education can further enhance what we can do in terms of no poverty, zero hunger, good health, well-being, equality education, and so on until SDG 17. That education plays a very important, significant roles in terms of enhancing all these SDG. Right? We provide education, we provide the people, we provide the young generation, so that they understand what need to be done. We provide the technology is there, but it should be used in terms of more sustainable, more responsible in that sense. This has been one of the report that talks about sustainable development post 2015 until now. Of course, begin with education. So education is is the catalyst for the development of course, always, as I mentioned already a lot of times. And how actually, for example, this is one example there that talks about SDG 10, right? How education actually expansion can reduce income inequality with educated generation. We hope this generation will enhance income inequality between the rich and the poor. So they produce such a generation with a proper education, then it will supposedly to reduce the inequality. But of course, this is not a short-term measure. This is a long-term measure which should have been started in 2015. And of course, all the countries in the world, I'm pretty sure, have embarking this journey into not just achieving the KPI of the United Nations SDG, but also, in other words, is that responsible contribute back to the society, to the country itself, which is more genuine in that sense, right? And this is another example of the of SDG 12, 13, 14, 15, which is related to environmental. How actually education help to change the behavior of the citizens. A theory, I use this, for example, is a theory of nudge to change behavior or change choice architecture, which is this nudging was in economics and has been made popularized, of course, and the person who made popularized it won the Nobel Prize because of that. And what can be done to us for change the behavior so that we do not just continuing pollute the environment, for example. And education plays a significant role in terms of playing that the education since young, we've been practiced or been in such a practice if we do that. So that kind of behavioral change can happen through education, right? And of course, as been mentioned again, education can accelerate the progress beyond, and education plays a significant role of all the SDG 1 until 17. I just give the example of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 just now. But a lot more we can do. And in one regards also, we have the United Nations or the education have what they have called a ESDG, means the education for SDG, means that to understand how education can help further to enhance, further help to empowering this the idea or sustainable development, but through SDG and of course through the digital transformation itself, right? It has been done. So for example, in this report here, it says that how universities plays a significant role in delivering the ESDG. In the university plays very significant. University plays an important role in terms of research, of course, education itself, to providing jobs, capacity to produce such a graduate, as I mentioned just now, capacity building, mobilize the young people, governance, and also external, leadership in that sense, because you produce such a talent in the universities or in the higher education, which can be useful, pretty much useful for the industry, and also to move forward from there, right? Of course, with the technological advancement, education also plays a significant role with AI, with artificial intelligence. It's actually very much powerful. AI enhance further education also further enhance at the same time enhance further the educational, the empowering this the technological advancement. In what way? Your AI, of course, can move further like what we have today and further of all technology. But from the education point of view, this is from my point of view, education will ensure that with the proper education, will ensure that we are much more responsible in using all those AI, using the data and related. So this is something from education perspective, be it informal education or formal education, informal education too, very much important. And And of course, AI and evolution of teachers, so how teachers, not just in school, but in the universities can further using the technology and rather just pushing, giving up the sweets or giving up the facts, but it can enhance in terms of become a facilitator, learners, and of course, as number 4 there, digital citizenship means that the students will be engaged or interact more with the technology, but in that can be used in terms of education and for the future of that, you know. And the last part that I want to touch a little bit on this, on the issue of what is SRI and ESG. I have to touch. Yesterday, one of the, I think, keynotes do mention a bit on the ESG, as been mentioned. Prof. Poi, maybe yesterday, I in time to listen to his presentation that talks about ESG is actually one part of a smaller part of the CSR that what we know, right? And SRI is more toward responsible investment, sustainable responsible investment. In that sense, they are more specific towards firms, sectors, and whatnot. Well, of course, this has been the priority for a lot of countries, a lot of firms today, that to achieve ESG itself, which is for ethical, social, and environment, which link back to the SDG itself, right? And this how all these things are related to education. With a proper education to know what is responsible investment, to know what is ESG, how to enhance that would enable us, the society or the graduates that we're going to produce, going to be very much ethical, very much to produce a proper or wholesome graduates that be useful and to enhance further our sustainable development idea, right? So this is just one example that have been used from the perspective of Indonesia, and ESG rating is very much important today, ESG investing and whatnot, and of course the portion of the E, S, and G have been used also in terms of developing an ecosystem for investment, sustainable, responsible investment for the future. And I mean, not just for the future, for now and until the future, which are very much related. So environment, of course, are related, and this can be easily linked back to SDG and of course education itself. Right, that's what I said just now. Firms, how they align education, and education here plays a significant role. If I can draw further this ecosystem, I would, the ecosystem here, education here would place a catalyst, right? Education here will play a catalyst to ensure that all this can work in that sense on how it align properly with what the idea or the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in that sense, right? So what's the future that we have? What kind of future that we want to produce? Sustainable development, of course, is one of the answer, but how we can ensure that the future is sustainable, and what I'm trying to bring for the past 30 minutes or so will be through education as an important catalyst. So this is also from one report from consultant report that talks about future economy would grow, of course, but within that boundary, a boundary of a planetary boundary, technological boundary, social foundation, and social cognitive boundary within these 4 boundaries, meaning that planetary boundary will be very much related to environmental. Technological boundary is what we discuss. I discuss a lot here. Social foundation is what we are doing, whether it's true what we are doing here right now, and to enhance further our networking in terms of connectivity between humans. That will be very much important, of course, for the future and what we need and what have changed throughout the sectors and related, right? Same thing goes to a social connective boundary, right? To summarize what I'm talking about is that in the VUCA world, adaptability is the key. And as I mentioned just now, education equip future leaders with SDG, perspective with SDG and then with EAG, SRI principle, empowering them to drive the change. That's what we see right now, because that's what is going on, and how we embed this into education system also. We put that into education. System as part of the curriculum, has been also mentioned yesterday by Prof. Hui. Not just doing research out of it, but to also practicing it. Practicing that for the future, for right now and for the future is of course, SDG as of now serve as the proper unified framework, ensuring holistic and inclusive development for all, not just for certain quarters or certain countries in this world. And number 4 there is that the investment, actually machine learning in technological advancement, digital transformation actually have proved valuable for us. All the countries embarking digital investment or technological advancement investment, which is good. Without that, this is not possible. This is not possible to happen. And that bring forward into the last part of what I mentioned, is that education actually would be enable individuals, parties to make an informed decision, and despite of whatever that we have, technological advancement and global interdependence, because as I again mentioned just now, we can't live in silo. Everything's interdependent between us, and technical advancement and with that, education plays very significant roles. As I mentioned just now in the beginning, I keep repeating that for this kind of key. Education is the key to so that we can produce a much more sustainable, much more meaningful, responsible future for all. Right? With that, for just take 1 minute to just promote the conference that they're going to happen next month in Kuching here. Those of you interested, please contact me. My email is there. I will share this slide later on. Right? So thank you very much for having me. That's my email. You can always email me. This is L, not I. A lot of confusion here. Normally my email, this is LPH, not IPH, right? This is my email, and thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Hock, for a very interesting topic. And now